All right, everybody, welcome back. We're diving into something pretty cool today.
Oh, yeah.
Basically, we're looking at how you turn code, this stuff programmers write,
Right.
into those like standalone programs anyone can use.
Yeah, like the .exe files.
Yeah, exactly. Those
That-
.exe
yeah.
files you just click on to work.
Right.
So,
Without needing like special setups or anything.
right, like you don't need to have Python installed or
Exactly.
anything like that. And the thing that caught our eye was this software called MultiCompiler. Have you heard of MultiCompiler before?
Yeah, I've seen it around. Looks pretty interesting.
Yeah, and the thing that's really interesting is,
Especially like all the different compilers it brings together.
yeah, it's like this whole suite.
Yeah.
And you can use it to make those executable files.
Exactly, for different programming languages.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I saw they have this free tier.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's called the educational plan, and it's free forever, which is kind of crazy.
That is pretty generous. I wonder what the catch is.
Yeah. But what can you actually do with just the free version?
Yeah.
That's what we want to find out.
Yeah, that's a great question.
So, before we get too deep into MultiCompiler and all the different tiers and stuff,
Yeah.
maybe we should take a step back and just talk about compilers in general.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, for people who might not know
Yeah.
what a compiler actually does.
So basically, a compiler is like a translator.
Yeah.
It takes the code that a programmer writes,
Right.
which is readable by humans, right?
Yeah, relatively.
Yeah, and it turns it into instructions that a computer processor can understand.
Okay.
Because the processor, at the end of the day, only understands ones and zeros, right?
Right.
So the compiler bridges that gap.
Yeah.
It takes the human-readable code and makes it machine-readable.
It's like this magical transformation process.
It is pretty amazing when you think about it.
And the MultiCompiler website, they actually call it like a magic box
Oh, really?
that solves like most of your problems.
Uh-huh. Well, it's a great tool, don't get me wrong.
Sure.
But it's not like a magic wand, right?
Yeah,
You still need to know how to code.
of course.
You still need to understand the languages and how to structure your programs.
Right.
The compiler just helps you get from that code to something the computer can actually run.
So it's more about convenience then.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it just makes the process a lot smoother.
Exactly.
So, okay, let's talk about these pricing tiers then, because this is where it gets interesting.
Okay, yeah.
So we mentioned that educational plan, which is free forever.
Right.
And that includes compilers for, let me see, Patch, Nuts, and HTML.
So pretty good starting point, especially for beginners.
Yeah, especially with that HTML compiler, you could build basic websites, right?
Absolutely. Like simple static pages, definitely.
Okay, cool. And then there's the paid tiers.
Right.
The first one is called the Software Developer Plan, and it's $135.
Okay, so not too bad.
Yeah. And with that one, you get Python and HTML5 added to the mix.
That's interesting.
And then the last tier is for like the serious programmers, the Programmer Business Plan.
Okay.
That one's $399.
So you get all the bells and whistles with that one, I imagine.
Oh, yeah. You get the full suite of compilers.
Right.
So like in addition to everything else, you get Ribble, Nuts, and Keeble.
Keyball. Yeah, I haven't heard of that one before.
Neither. Sounds pretty intense, though.
Yeah, I'm guessing it's for something very specific.
Yeah, probably.
So, I mean, with all these different tiers and all these different compilers, it really depends on what kind of project you're working on.
Yeah, like what would each of these tiers let you do?
Okay, so let's break it down.
Okay.
With the free tier, you're kind of limited to like basic scripting and really simple web pages. So like you could automate some tasks on your computer
Okay.
or create a basic website with some text and images.
But nothing too fancy.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, what about that Software Developer Plan with the Python and HTML5?
Now that opens up a lot more possibilities.
Yeah.
Well, with Python, you can do web development, data analysis, even some basic AI stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, so you could build like a more complex web application or analyze some data and create visualizations.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so it gives you a lot more flexibility.
Okay, so what about that last tier, that Programmer Business Plan?
That one, I'm guessing, is geared towards more niche development.
Because of the languages.
Yeah, like that MNuts language.
Yeah.
I looked it up, and it's apparently used for embedded systems.
What about embedded system?
Think like the software that runs in your car
Oh, wow.
or like a smart appliance.
Okay.
So pretty specialized stuff.
Yeah. And what about Keeble?
Keeble, I think, is used more in like business application development,
Oh,
so like
yeah.
enterprise software and things like that.
So that top tier is for people building like really specialized stuff.
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay, so let's bring it back to our listeners for a sec.
Sure.
Imagine you're listening to this and you have a coding project you want to work on. What would make MultiCompiler a good fit for you?
Well, first of all, think about the languages you want to use.
Right.
Like, if you're only interested in Python, then the software developer plan would be enough.
Okay.
But if you need those more specialized languages,
Yeah.
then you might need that top tier.
Right. And what about the complexity of the project?
Yeah, that's another important factor.
Like if it's just a simple script.
Right. The free tier might be perfect.
But if you're building like a full-blown application.
You'll probably need one of the paid plans.
Okay. And then the last thing to consider is whether you need to share your project as an executable file.
That's really what MultiCompiler is all about, right?
Yeah.
It's taking your code and making it so anyone can run it.
Without needing any special setup.
Exactly.
So if that's important to you.
Then MultiCompiler is definitely worth checking out.
Right. Okay. So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
MultiCompiler seems like a pretty cool tool.
Yeah, it's definitely convenient having all those compilers in one place.
And that free tier is super tempting.
For sure, especially for beginners.
But yeah, you really got to think about your needs and what you want to achieve.
And one thing that struck me while looking at the website, they only mention Windows compatibility.
Oh, yeah.
So what about people using other operating systems?
That's a great point. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, it just highlights that even with tools like this,
Yeah.
there are still limitations.
And that software development is complex.
Exactly. You got to consider the whole ecosystem.
All right. Well, I think that's about all the time we have for today.
Yeah, this was a good deep dive.
Yeah, hopefully this gave everyone a good overview of MultiCompiler.
Can maybe spark some ideas for their own projects.
Exactly. And if you're interested in learning more,
Definitely do your own research.
there's tons of information out there.
Yeah, and you never know what you might discover.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
See you next time.
And happy coding.
Yeah.